Now, again, one of the things we always need to keep working on and appreciating is how much the different toy and doll makers work together in unison. Heads from one company, bodies from another, as we talked about with the Gaultier before. And in the case of automaton makers, commissioning heads from porcelain doll makers or bisque doll makers. And this is Leopold Lambert, a very, very prolific maker of wonderful automatons in the 1890s. And he decided he wanted faces for his automaton that would be in conjunction with the action or the motion that was being shown. So he commissioned from Emile Jumeau, maker of antique dolls, a series of heads to be done. And this is an example of one of them. This is his wonderful crying character girl, the bisque head made by Jumeau for Leopold Lambert. And I'm going to play it for you so you can see. It has the original music tune on the side of the box, and you can see her little doll is broken that she was playing with, and she holds it up back and forth. She takes her hanky to her eye, wipes away her tears, wearing her wonderful original costume. So she's saying, "Look, my doll is broken." Now she tips her head down to look at the doll. And now she lifts her hanky as though to wipe away the tears, and she actually does have the crystal tear in her eye. And having that expressive face enhance the motion, the whole activity of what she's doing, as opposed to just having a pretty little doll face. Now, Emile Jumeau was a really savvy guy. In reading about him, I hope all of you read the Jumeau book, because you can read about some of the extraordinary marketing techniques he used. We talk in our country about Henry Ford. You should go back and read about Emile Jumeau. He not only produced a product, his dolls, that were extraordinary. They were the keynote of quality dolls that could still be made affordable to people. But he also was a marketing genius and a production genius, and really worth studying. Well, he was making these character heads for this automaton company, and he said, well, wait a minute. If I'm going to make them as automaton heads with the flat cut neck so it could accommodate to the automaton, why don't I just change it and make it with a socket neck and turn it into a doll? And I can have a whole line of dolls. And he did that. He called them his series Fantastique. Now, what do you think happened? Well, they weren't very successful. And the reason they weren't successful is that this is not a face that a child really wants to play with. They're holding their doll, they're cuddling it, they're loving it. It's not a play doll for a child. It was done for a purpose. So while he made his series Fantastique, there were, I believe, 21 or 22 models, some of which have never been identified. There were so few of them made that they remain among the most extraordinary dolls to be found today. And we are fortunate enough to have 3 of them here to show you today. The first one is the model 208, and this is the child with a wonderful, extraordinary, wonderful laughing expression, very, very joyous and beautiful bisque complementing it. When the inventory was done of the Jumeau firm in 1899, before they merged with SFBJ, they did an inventory of all the remaining dolls. Now remember, these were first introduced in the early 1890s, so there only would have been about 8 or 9 years of production. They did an inventory for SFBJ. How many of these actual dolls remained in the Jumeau inventory in 1899? And we're lucky enough to have had that inventory thanks to Francois Timer. Now remember, these character dolls were only introduced in the 1890s and were made for only a period of like 8 years at this time. Remaining in the inventory of the Jumeau company in 1899 in this particular size were only 17 17 examples of this doll. So that would mean, presumably some might have been sold previously to that, but of what would be available today, do you realize how rare this doll would have to be? This is a really special one. This was sent in to us from an original family. In 1905, in San Francisco, a resident of San Francisco, Ann Dorr, saw this doll in the famous department store window of the White House department store in San Francisco. She knew her cousin was a doll collector, so she went in and bought it for her. She gave it to her cousin. Her cousin kept it for many years. Now, this is 1905, so presumably the doll had then been in existence for some 7, 8 years, because it had to have been made prior to 1899. She bought it for her cousin, who kept it for many years. Later, her cousin, who actually was French, moved back to France and gave the doll to Ann Dorr, who kept it in her family all of these years. It's never been out of the family. At one time in 1930, at the Mir and Frank department store in Portland, Oregon, there was a doll contest, and Ann entered the doll there, and it won the grand prize. You can imagine, of course it would. But she kept it, she passed it on in the family, and now the family is offering this doll. It's the first time it has been presented on the doll market, except for Ann Dorr, who bought it for her cousin, who was a doll collector in 1905. We have another wonderful example from the series Fantastique by Emile Jumeau. This is the Model 217, Model 217 from the series, affectionately known as Tongue Girl. I don't know what else you can say. So people have said she expresses so many things, like she's sassy, she's sticking her tongue out. Others have said she's crying and she's just very, very distressed over something. Whatever, she is extraordinary. And she has her original costume. She even has a Blue Ribbon Award from a UFDC doll convention held in Washington, D.C., imagine that, just like this year, in 1980, in which she won the first prize. Very, very extraordinary doll in her all-original costume. And of that particular model, in the 1899 inventory, there were only 11 remaining of this size. In all of our years, 45 years in the doll business, this is only the second one that we have ever been offered to sell. So that tells you how extraordinarily rare this doll is. And finally, from that series Fantastique, there were 200, the series went up to 225. And this is number 221 of the series. By the time we get up to the model number 221, the models are becoming less what I would call almost highly characterized, and just becoming very, having great expression and a really wonderful look about them, but not having the wide smiles or the tongue sticking out, that type of thing. A very elegant woman. This, to tell you the rarity of it, in the 1899 inventory, there were no examples left of this doll. No examples left of this doll at all. Extraordinarily rare, and I want to just turn it because I want you to see the planes of her face from all sides. Very, very magnificently done. Jumeau had a wonderful idea. It was at a wrong time to present them. The world was changing. There wasn't that much of a market for them. And I always find it interesting to compare this to the Cameron Reinhardt art character dolls that were introduced, well, it's like 15 years later, in 1909. And they introduced dolls because they wanted to get away from the very, very pretty, idealistic dolls. They wanted to produce dolls that showed children having really real faces of how their expressions might actually be. They also were unsuccessful because, again, children wanted the pretty dolls, and that's what sold. So two movements to try to create highly characterized, highly artistic dolls, and the market would not absorb them for children. It's made them very rare today and great treasures to find. We're very pleased to be able to offer them. And by the way, this 221, what an extraordinary costume. Likely original, just absolutely fabulous.